is nothing united in many states of America. They are, in fact, deeply divided states in crisis. Sweeping riots have now spread beyond the flashpoint in Minneapolis.
I have said it here before. I am neither Republican nor Democratic. I tend to lean with the Republican Party because of my views on the border and security and gun rights of each and every American. I tend to support those who support the Constitution. The Democratic Party is at war with America. That is very clear message of the Democrats' response to the crises that have engulfed our nation over the last 6 months, made our streets war zones and destroyed small business communities that are the lifeblood of our system. When the country was attacked by a deadly virus from China back in January, the Democrats attacked the president's efforts to stop it at the border, then blamed him for 100,000 deaths that have followed. Yet, the majority of Democrat governors controlled the health systems for every major center of the COVID-19 devastation and were 100% responsible for any of the policies that have failed because they implemented them. When the president attempted to reopen the economy in May, Democratic governors and mayors issued draconian orders to arrest individuals violating their social distancing implementation Nazi rules. Injunctions by strolling in parks, lounging on the beaches, and worst of all, attempting to revive their barbershops and salons. As a direct consequence of these imposed shutdowns, 40 million Americans lost their jobs. Too many of us, the Democrats' purpose was clear: to depress the economy and blame the consequences on the president. This became their basic theme of their political ads and propaganda, that it was all Trump's fault. Yet these seditious Democratic attacks on the commander-in-chief in the midst of war against an invisible enemy maintained a cover of plausibility because of the uncertainty surrounding the virus and how it was spread. This whole mask was dropped when a civil insurrection erupted in the wake of the horrific police murder of George Floyd. In its wake, America's streets were filled with massive crowds of what they call protesters by day and rioters and looters by night. And as it turned out, domestic terrorists. These terrorists, led by the communist organization Antifa, used the protest as a cover for the violent and hate-filled attacks on ordinary citizens and their businesses. As these attacks escalated into the torching of city centers and devastation of poor communities, the hypocrisies of Democratic parties and their true agendas became inescapably clear. And virtually all of the mayhem was centered in these Democratic-controlled states and cities. The same mayors who had jailed local business people and just the ordinary citizens for congregating in groups of more than 10 were utterly silent and baffled as crowds of thousands formed to tear their cities apart. Meanwhile, not a single word was uttered, not a single arrest was made by these same Democratic governors and mayors to prevent the protesters and rioters from violating the social distancing ordinances that had been used to close churches and houses of worship the week before. While stores, apartment buildings, and even police stations were torched by violent radicals, while ordinary citizens were being terrorized, Democratic governors were reluctant to call out their National Guard and nip the riots in the bud. This reluctance became active resistance when they defied the president's appeals to take every measure necessary to protect every innocent man, woman, and child, to stop the terrorists in their tracks and restore law and order to our cities. one of the most frightening sights amidst all the mayhem was the direct threat to the street terrorists posed to the White House. Thousands of protesters, you gotta imagine dozens of rioters, gathered in front of the White House. Now, what were the protesters doing at the White House in the first place? The president had condemned the murder of George Floyd and called his family immediately after the event. There wasn't a politician or public figure in the entire nation who was defending the killer cop. Why were these crowds menacing the White House and attacking the Secret Service? 50 of whose members had already been injured by their violent assaults. Every night for the preceding week, the peaceful riots had turned violent, and attacks on law enforcement and of the surrounding area. And the night after night, the Democratic mayor of Washington failed to provide the security necessary to make the street in front of the White House a safe place for the members of our government, including the president and other civilians that were nonviolent, were put in harm's way. So we had citizens put in harm's way by other citizens creating violence. On Sunday, May 31st, the mob in front of the White House set fire to a 200-year-old St. John's Church. Fed up with the support that Democratic governors and mayors were given to the insurrection and the violence, the president decided on a bold step. On Monday, June 1st, he massed overwhelming numbers of the National Guard and demanded an early curfew. Planning to clear the streets and demonstrate to the seditious governors and mayors what they needed to do, the National Guard drove the angry mob, protesters, and terrorists away from the White House. And then the president and key members of his cabinet walked over to the church. Every American who cares for their country and its president who was watching this walk held their breath, uncertain too as whether the president and his cabinet would be attacked and possibly assassinated, as so many public figures on the left had already advocated. Yet, no sooner had the walk been completed than CNN and the Democratic media were mocking the president and creating the Democratic new fake news talking points. Trump had ordered the National Guard to use tear gas to attack a group of peaceful protesters in order to feed his narcissism for a photo op. That was the spin. As if Donald Trump needed a photo op, and as if the peaceful protesters across the country had not systematically provided cover for the black-clad Antifa terrorists wreaking havoc all around the country. As if the need to purportedly use tear gas did not expose the menace posed by a crowd that was ready to violate a curfew right in front of the White House and resist the representatives of law enforcement who had asked them 3 times to leave. Along with Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the Democratic mayor of Washington, D.C., Senator Elizabeth Warren condemned the president's actions, summing up the party line as, quote, "The President of the United States tear-gassed peaceful protesters in order to clear the way for a useless photo op outside the White House, just after vowing to activate the military against our own people. Lives and our democracy are in danger." Lives and democracy are definitely in danger, but the danger comes from a Democratic Party that is at war with their own country and willing to aid and abet a terrorist force, Antifa, whose clearly stated purpose is the destruction of this country. Again, I am Michael. This is the Patriot Hour. God bless, Godspeed to each and every one of you. And where we go one, we go all. Please help share this video across all social media platforms while you can. We are heavily shadow banned and have been. We've been here 3 years. We appreciate all the Patriots and the support of the channel. Take a look down below in the description box and smash the like button. Thank you.
Andrew, we want to update you on a surprise visit that the president made just after those primetime remarks in the Rose Garden last hour. Following his comment that he would be visiting a sacred place, he left the White House and walked with his Attorney General, his Chief of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, his press team, his daughter, and his son-in-law across Lafayette Park, the area of the nation's capital that had just moments before that been cleared with tear gas and rubber pellets where peaceful protesters had been. The president here is appearing in front of St. John's Church. It's known as the President's Church. Every president has attended services there. President Trump and his family went to a service on Inauguration Day at St. John's Church, and it sustained a fire overnight.